Chapter 64 of This Country of Ours, Part 7. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This Country of Ours, Part 7, by H. E. Marshall. Chapter 64. Washington. First in War, First in Peace. After the peace was signed in September 1783, all the British soldiers left America, and Washington felt that his work was done. So he resolved to give up his post as commander-in-chief and go back to his pleasant Virginian home. He was glad at the thought of going back to the home he loved, yet sad at the thought of saying farewell to his officers. For 8 years they had worked for him faithfully. Together they had faced dark days. Together they had been through deep waters. And now that victory was won, Washington's heart was filled with love and gratitude. It was at Faunce's Tavern in New York that Washington met his officers for the last time. When he came into the long, low room where they were all gathered, he was so moved that he could not speak. Silently he went to the table and filled a glass with wine. Raising it, he turned to the men who stood as silently about him, and with an effort commanding his voice, he spoke. "With a heart full of love and gratitude," he said, "I now take leave of you, most devoutly wishing that your latter days may be as prosperous and happy as your former ones have been glorious and honorable." Then, having drunk to the toast, he set the glass down. "I cannot come to each of you to take my leave," he said brokenly, "but shall be obliged if each of you will come and take me by the hand." The general, who was nearest to Washington, then turned to him and silently grasped his hand. With tears in his eyes, Washington put his arms about him and kissed him. And thus one after the other his officers silently said good-bye, no one of them trusting himself to speak. Then, still in silence, they followed him to the boat which was to carry him on the first part of his way to Annapolis, where Congress was assembled, and where he was to lay down his sword. His journey was like a royal progress. In every town and village through which he passed, the people gathered to cheer and bless him. So he reached Annapolis. There before Congress he resigned his commission. Then, with a sigh of relief, a simple citizen once more, he mounted his horse and rode homewards. But now the colonies which had wrung themselves free from the rule of Britain were not altogether happy. They called themselves the United States, but there was little union. Before the Revolution there had been much jealousy between the various states. For a time, indeed, in the heat of the struggle, they had forgotten these differences, but now that the struggle was over and peace had come, these jealousies appeared again. Each state had its own government, its own taxes, its own money. So there was great confusion. But no state wanted to give up any of its privileges, and it seemed hopeless to institute one central government, for each state thought only of itself, and each one was afraid of giving Congress too much power, lest it should usurp the power of the state government. The states quarreled with each other about their boundaries. Some of them made absurd claims to vast territory on the strength of their royal charters, quite forgetting that these charters were now done away with. There were riots everywhere. Indeed, never was the state in such danger of shipwreck as now at its very beginning. Washington from his quiet retreat at first watched the struggle anxiously, but not despairingly. "Everything will come right at last," he said. "My only fear is that we shall lose a little reputation first." As time went on, however, he grew more anxious. "I think we have opposed Great Britain," he said, "and have arrived at the present state of peace and independency to very little purpose, if we cannot conquer our own prejudices." But Washington had no real need to fear. The men who had fought for their freedom proved themselves worthy of it, and in May, 1787, a meeting of all the states was called at Philadelphia. Of this convention, as it was called, Washington was chosen president. It was no easy post, nor was the business for which the members of the convention were called together a simple business. They had, indeed, a very great task to perform, the task of forming a new constitution, or mode of government, which all states would accept. It was not easy to please everyone, and also do thoroughly good work. So for 4 months the convention
Sample complete. Ready to continue?